Vold was first to speak in this silent journey. Sorry that this is a reality, Vel. You don't deserve to deal with that. The masked woman chuckled. I appreciate that enough to allow you to call me by a cute nickname, Vold. I sincerely do appreciate that you haven't tried to lay a finger on me, yet. Speaking of which, the mercenaries' footfalls transitioned from the hard sound of cobblestone to the resonating click of hollow wooden flooring. They were in the Easthorn. Veliana turned to the hunter. Almost all experiences I've had here have ended in someone getting their nose broken or, if it escalates enough, having their arm removed. Trust me, almost every male human who meanders into this place gets far too handsy. So I hope you're ready to use that bow of yours, or, at the very least, put those big punching fists of yours to use. Vold nodded in response, tensing only slightly. The two walked into the surprisingly busy tavern, scanning their surroundings. Veliana walked directly to the bar, looking straight at the server behind the table. Hello, Novat.
Veliana, how are you?
The barkeep gave a nod, seeming to be busy cleaning a rather large tankard. The bounty hunter sighed. Been better, Nov, been better. Had a fat lard try to get handsy with me not even 30 minutes ago. Novat scowled.
I think they can do anything those lords do. Imagine they'll learn to watch themselves round you, being a freelancer and all.
He spoke with a thick Gnostic accent. Veliana laughed. Ha ha! Aye, that they do. Maybe. But I like being paid and not being kicked out of cities, yeah? She tapped her finger on the bar. Listen, I hate to turn this unpleasant, but I'm here on work, I'm afraid. Seen any suspicious types loitering about? The barkeep frowned.
I see suspicious folks every day. This is the Easthorn. You missed that, Vel.
A groan escaped the woman's lips. You know what? Okay, alright. You know that stupid shit who was up on the bounty birds for stealing that antique something or other from Lord Abram Elbrox?
Yeah, that. I saw those bounties everywhere.
Well, I took his fucking head. But that's not the point. Have you seen anyone talking to that stupid shit? Novat appeared to think for a moment.
You know, I actually have. Mere weeks ago, he was reporting to some hooded fellow who seemed real creepy coming in here.
Veliana narrowed her eyes. A hooded guy just walking into the Easthorn? And he didn't draw any suspicion? The barkeep shrugged.
Oh, he did. He drew suspicion, but for one, I've seen weirder. And also, he struck me as the kind of fellow who would be bad to cross paths with. You know the types, the kind that would probably make you disappear some odd night, yeah?
The Tremiere nodded. Yeah, unfortunately I do. Well, how often's this guy been in? And when does he come in? Novat set his now clean tankard down, giving it a good look over.
Well, he comes in pretty often. Never orders anything. Never talks to anybody. He just comes in and sits like he's waiting for something. And I feel as though the times he comes in are entirely random.
The silver-eyed woman rapped her knuckles against the bar. Well, I hope you don't mind, Munov, but we're going to take a seat in here. And keep an eye out. And I hope you're not offended I don't order anything to drink today. I want to keep my senses clear, yeah? Novat looked up from the tankard.
Do what you want, Vel. You've been good to me, and I've no reason to turn you away.
Veliana gave a small nod. Thanks, Nov. She turned to Vold. Come on, Hunter. Let's take a seat. The two moved to a far seat near the corner of the room and sat down. They sat in silence for several moments, Veliana watching the front door. Vold shifted uncomfortably before finally speaking his mind. So, I have to ask, if you do not mind. That man, the barkeep, spoke with a Gnostic accent. It seems rather odd up here in the Imperium. Veliana shrugged a bit, her eyes not leaving the front entrance. Novat's a good guy. Known him for a long time. He grew up down in the south, in the northern Humes. You might know it as the Bastion. Said he moved up to this frozen wasteland to get away from the internal turmoil of the Bastion kingdoms. She turned to look at Vold for a moment. Despite how they treat women up here in the Imperium, it's nothing compared to how they treat women, not to mention Achieri or arcane sensitives, down in the Bastion kingdoms. She turned back to the front door. No, that's no arcane sensitive, and he's definitely no woman. But I'd imagine he was sick of seeing all the death, torture, and other harsh shit down there. The hunter's look of concern deepened. What kind of things happen down there? I have not been. The masked woman shook her head. I once saw a man accuse his neighbour of witchcraft. The things they did to her, publicly, for everyone to see. She shivered. And nobody stops the abuse. Her silver eyes met Vold's for a moment. To hammer in that point, there are rumours that the Grand Duchess and High Priestess, La Chère Darrow, over in the Unification, has a dungeon full of slaves for her own personal pleasures. And those Bastoni people supposedly frown on slavery. Pah! Vold wrinkled his nose in distaste. How did you survive doing work down there? Knowing where not to go, my friend. You don't operate in Lillian's kingdom if you're an Achieri of any sort. And you keep your head down if you're anything beyond a paladin of Eithros in the Darrowlands. She offered a small shrug. The hunter shook his head and looked up to see an odd sight. A man with long, flowing robes of black and a hood drawn over his head entered the tavern. He turned to look at the two, and Vold could see that there was nothing more than a dark void under his hood. Yet he felt as though there were eyes boring into his very soul. Much to the hunter's relief, the man of shadow turned away, and, as expected, walked to a far seat to wait silently. Vold looked to Veliana. That is the one we seek, yes? The masked bounty hunter eyed the hooded man. Aye, I think so. Something about him's disquieting, gotta say. What say you we go say hello? The huntsman pursed his lips. Seems convenient, does it not? This individual coming in at this moment. Veliana narrowed her eyes. Aye, but we do what we must, yeah? Vold nodded, and the two stood and pushed their way through the room. But Veliana was halted by a large hand that grabbed her arm. She turned to look at a rather square-headed man with a large, stupid grin.
Hey, pretty girl! What say you take off that stupid mask? Can we...
His sentence was halted with a resonating crack as the bounty hunter's gauntlet met his jaw. She looked up to see that Vold was several steps ahead of her, approaching the robed individual. She surged forward with determination. She came to the hunter's side as he took his final step up to the mysterious man. Veliana spoke first. You, creepy guy. I've been told you hired a man to stay...
Your arrival was foretold, Tremieri.
The man's voice was displaced, seeming to come from all directions.
You waste your time here. It is ultimately more profitable to let this job lie, if you consider your life to be of value.
The masked mercenary tensed for a moment, caught entirely off guard. After only a moment, she gathered herself and quickly reached out to grab the man by the neck area. All right, you know what, weird guy, She cut herself off as her hands met the man's neck and, instead of stopping at hard flesh, passed through to grab nothing, as the shadowy visage dissipated into mist. Veliana turned quickly to see the same man walking out of the tavern. She grabbed Vold by the arm. Come on, Hunter! This has piqued my curiosity. The masked woman took a single step before a rather large man blocked her path. He stood taller than both Veliana and Vold, the latter of whom being fairly tall, and looked down at her with disapproving eyes, shaking his head.
You cannot simply hit my friend.
The masked woman stopped, looking defiantly up at the large man, who stood at least 2 heads taller than her. Then your friend shouldn't have so brazenly touched me, yeah? No, I'm busy, so get out of my way. As she tried to take a step past, the wall of a man moved to block her path again, this time placing a hand on her shoulder.
You are going to come with us, or this shall turn into a nasty scene.
Veliana looked over at Novad, who had, an expression of growing displeasure creeping across his face, and then looked up to the unwelcome hand placed on her shoulder. She released Vold's arm, her eyes slowly turning to look at the large obstacle in her way. You want this to turn nasty, idiot? Yeah, it'll turn nasty. But I ain't going anywhere with you, or your ugly friend. The large man scowled, tightening his grip on her shoulder.
I can lift you with one hand, little girl. You're coming with us whether you like it or...
The brute's sentence was cut off as Veliana swiftly swatted the unwanted hand off of her shoulder and drove her other fist into his stomach. He reeled back, placing a hand on the table behind him, catching both his breath and his balance. A rattle of metal could be heard, and Veliana could see that other friends of this one were drawing shoddy weapons. Veliana laughed. Ha ha ha! You want this to get more nasty than it already was? Fine! She looked past the large man at a frowning Novat. Sorry, Nov. These shit stains are asking for it. She drew both blades and slid a foot back, readying herself. Her eyes scanned the pack of brutes before her, studying their movements. These were typical drunks. They had no training or finesse. This'll be easy, she thought. Ready to put your marksmanship to use, Hunter? Vold's distressed voice echoed across the tavern. I do not wish to kill anyone right now. The first club swung at Veliana. She sidestepped, parrying it and swiftly disarming its wielder with a quick motion, before bringing her other blade up and grinding it across the bone of the man's forearm, severing muscle and spraying blood. She looked over her shoulder, eyes glinting with amusement. Then just maim him, stupid! Veliana drew her blade back, its metal dripping with fresh blood. She looked to her side, just in time to see an axe coming down towards her shoulder. She blocked the swing with both blades, locking it in place. She now saw that the wielder of this weapon was the man she punched in the first place. He was gritting his teeth in fury, staring into her eyes.
I'll have you all to myself. I want to see you on your knees.
Spittle flew from the man's mouth as his axe was pushed backward towards him. The mercenary chuckled before pulling her blades away and sliding back quickly, allowing the man's axe to swing down and make contact with absolutely nothing. She let out a loud laugh. You've got a weak arm! I bet you're shit in bed. Veliana felt air rush past her head and saw an arrow pass through her peripheral to hit some target of little interest to her. She was still focused on the man who she had just insulted. She watched as the square-headed man raised his axe up, readying himself for another swing. She lowered her blade slightly and sidestepped the oncoming axe, driving her knee into her assailant's approaching face in the process. The man dropped on his back, entirely unconscious. The masked elf turned to see the larger man rushing at her, his good hand tensed into a fist. She ducked under the oncoming blow. As she rose, she raised herself on her left foot's toes, bounding upward. Just as the big man turned to face her, he was met with Veliana's right steel-toed boot to the jaw. The force certainly broke something, as well as threw her target headfirst into a nearby wall, immediately knocking him out. Veliana turned to look at the rest of the group. Two men, a tall and skinny one, and a short and fat one, both had arrows buried into their ankles, and were quickly trying to pull them out. Several more of these drunk brawlers were backing up, and even going so far as to simply turn around and run out of the tavern. The masked woman laughed. Ha ha! I think we made our point. She looked back to Vold. All right, back to work, yeah? Come on. Veliana raised a finger at her own statement, walking to the bar and looking up to Novat. She set a pouch of coin on the table. You're welcome, Nov. I tried not to kill any, just for you. The barkeep sighed, snatching the coin pouch up.
Yeah, thank you, Vel. Thank you for only getting some blood on the floor and tables of my establishment. I really appreciate it.
The woman laughed in response. Ha ha ha! Any time, Nov. She turned and walked to the exit, beckoning Vold along. Vold followed the Tremieri, and they found themselves back in the cold street once more. Veliana looked around, trying to find the quarry that they were previously chasing. She had no such luck, but instead found a beggar shivering on the side of the road. She cocked her head and approached him. You, sir? Did you happen to see a weird robed guy walk out of the tavern? I'll pay you rather well for your information, friend. The beggar, a blond man with a patchy, unshaven face, looked up at her with sunken eyes.
Who did the man?
Yeah, I did see such a man. He went toward the trade district. He looked like he was in a bit of a hurry. Viliana sighed and gave the man a small pouch of coin. Thanks, friend. You've been a real help. What did they call you? The man smiled gratefully. My name is Daniel, miss, and I'm happy to help.